Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We got to the end of the transfer window. It was a strange deadline day. I didn't expect to be kind of working very, very late, up to midnight and after, on Cameron Carter-Vickers and working out exactly what would happen with him. He was probably the one player I didn't think would be the person that would be keeping me up late at night trying to figure out exactly what was going on, because it was a strange one, and we'll come to that in a little bit. But we got there. We're now officially at the end of a summer that has brought all of the managerial chaos, all of the transfers in and out of the club, players having their contracts essentially torn up, mutually agreed to be torn up, and Tottenham at top of the table and Arsenal at bottom. What a strange time it has been, but we have got there. I must admit, when I kind of put my laptop screen down last night at, when did I finish? Almost at 1 a.m. I just let out a big old exhalation of air. Just like, whew, now we can just concentrate on the football. I know a lot of you love everything else that comes with it, and I enjoy certain elements of it, but I must admit it's lovely to have got to the end of this whole period, as it were. We start again in January. So let's look at deadline day in itself. It was busy, but perhaps not busy, well, probably not busy in the way that Tottenham fans and you all wanted it to be. It was busy with things still happening. I mean, technically there were 4 transfers on the day at Tottenham. I think clearly Tottenham fans, and myself included, of course, would have liked to have seen more than just the one incoming from those 4. But let's talk about the one who did come in the door. Emerson Royal, who, yes, does sound like we're talking about a cheeseburger from France in Pulp Fiction. John Travolta's character talking about a Royale with cheese. I don't know why, but it just sounds like it. And I should say, if you haven't already heard this, that Royale actually isn't his name. It's a nickname given to him by his uncle because he resembled a kind of jello that they have out in Sao Paulo area called Royale. I have no idea whether he was a rather rotund child and he looked a little bit like jelly. I don't know. But that is why he is called Emerson Royal. I think we'll probably, for the purposes of all of this, we'll just call him Emerson going forward, which will make it a little bit easier. But he has joined a new right-back for Tottenham, 22-year-old Brazil international. He's a bit on the fringes of the Brazil squad. He was at the Copa America. I think he came on in the final. I don't think he's in their current international squad, which is a good thing for Tottenham because it means that he can rock up later this week, get straight into training as well, because I understand his vaccination status means he doesn't have to quarantine. So that's all good for Tottenham. He arrives for roughly 30 million euros with about 5 million of that add-ons, which is a very good deal. 5-year contract he signed, number 12 shirt he will wear. It's quite an interesting one with him because I kind of felt a little bit sorry for him. Not sorry that he's coming for Tottenham, gutted. More the fact that, you know, if you haven't had the chance to read it, it explains it really nicely in his own words. His Instagram message to the Barcelona fans. In essence, he just always dreamt of playing for Barcelona. That was his dream as a kid. They were his club as a kid. And if you're not aware with Emerson, it was a joint financial agreement between Barcelona and Real Betis that took him from Athletic Mineiro in Brazil across to Europe. And the deal saw him play 2.5 seasons at Betis, and then Barcelona had the option to trigger, I think it wasn't a lot of money, I think maybe 9 million euros, something like that, to then take him to Barcelona, which had just happened. He'd had his unveiling with the president. He'd done, that classic kind of keepy-uppy thing, had all the photos. One for the future, they declared, played a few games, and then suddenly, this financial problem that has been growing and growing at Barcelona came to such a head. Fabio Paratici, I'm going to pronounce it right this week. Fabio Paratici went over to Barcelona to have a little look at what he could potentially get out of the club. Spent a couple of days there before coming back just in time for the Watford game. And one of the players they spoke about was Emerson. And Barcelona were like, we just need the money. So they accepted it. Emerson at first obviously wanted to stay. He wanted to have his dream move to Barcelona. And he was just told by the club, we need you to go. Unfortunately, we just cannot afford to turn down deals right now. We saw Griezmann go late in the window as well. The Barcelona squad, it just barely resembles the squad of previous seasons now. It's incredible. It'll be amazing to see what happens to them in La Liga this season. None of those star players really that you'd associate normally with Barcelona, certainly in attacking areas. But yeah, so Emerson wrote a lovely message on Instagram, essentially saying, to the fans, I dreamt of being here. This is what I'd always wanted. I'm so sorry that it's very much hello and goodbye. But unfortunately, that's just the way circumstances are. However, he looks like he's quickly turned his attentions to Tottenham. He seems a happy chap. Some of the videos we've seen, even his initial message on Instagram when he joined Spurs was time to be happy. And his video was a big old smiling video. He looks like a bit of a character. He's going to have, he's going to hopefully be able to settle in. He knows Lo Celso, played for half a season at Betis with him. Lucas, obviously, as he did with Carlos Vinicius, will take good care of him, no doubt, as a fellow Brazilian. And obviously, he'll have Espirito Santo speaking his language. He'll have I'm sure he will speak pretty good Spanish as well, having spent 2.5 years there. So there's all the Spanish parts. He should settle in quite well. In terms of what some people have asked me, like, why did Spurs go for Emerson over Takehiro Tomiyasu? And what I'm told was eventually it just came down to the decision of what kind of right back Tottenham really required, especially with Japhet Tenganga's kind of emergence, I'd say, in really, really hitting new heights. And the feeling just was that Emerson was more of a natural right back that can bomb on and do exactly what they want from an attacking sense, whereas Tomiyasu was perhaps something more akin to Tanganga, a little bit more of a can play at centre-back, can play at right-back, slightly more defensive than he is attacking, and they just kind of felt that Emerson ticked the boxes for a different option. And obviously, we now know Aurier has gone, so you kind of haven't got that kind of right back anymore. Matt Doherty definitely, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with him this season. So here, Emerson as a player, this is very much a scenario where I think we're going to just have to see what happens. The reason I say that is because I haven't seen masses of him. I'm not going to pretend I have, and I'm certainly not the kind of person, you know me by now, I'm not the kind of person that will watch a YouTube compilation and go, wow, it's the greatest player I've ever seen. Because that's not how it works. So I've been asking around. I've been asking journalists in Spain about him and people within Spurs, what to expect. And also I listened to Tim Vickery speaking on Sky Sports. I know some people have got this thing about Tim Vickery because he once said Paulinho was going to be the next Frank Lampard, which, yes, in hindsight, and we've all been there. We've all bigged up players that have gone on to not be the player we thought they were going to be. But what I would say about it, I like Tim Vickery. I like what he does, and I think he's spot on with a lot of stuff he does. I think, yes, we all make predictions that don't come true. But what I would say is I'd listen to what he has to say on the whole. What he said about Emerson was, obviously, he'd have seen more of him in terms of playing for Brazil and stuff like that. He thinks that he's very raw, still got a lot of kind of developing to do. He's only 22, so that's quite right. One thing I'd say that sounds like could be disputed slightly is that he looks at him more as a pure attacking right back, whereas some people who have seen him in playing for Betis said that actually the defensive side of his game is pretty good. But yeah, it was quite a mixed review, I felt, from Tim Vickery. And so I also asked around a few journalists in Spain, and their reviews were quite mixed as well. It was very much he's a work in progress. A lot of people pointed to the last season at Betis and said he did very well in that season. That could be the sign that he is now developing, and that could be what Tottenham have seen. And those I spoke to in and around Tottenham have said that the feeling that they've got about him is that he's athletically superb, fitness levels are incredible, he's going to motor up and down that side. They think technically, maybe not entirely what you'd expect from a Brazilian, but certainly has the ability to get forward as well. So, as I said, very much one that I'm going to kind of just judge with my own eyes. I like to do that with players, managers, whatever. I like to listen to what other people have got to say, note it, but not let it define or guide what I believe about a player. So, looking forward to seeing how he settles in at Tottenham and what we see of him. I should think he should be pretty match fit. He should be ready to go straight off the bat. Let's see. So, his arrival obviously then created Tottenham Hotspur Fullback FC, where as a club they had 3 left backs and 4 right backs, and clearly that's too much. Out of the right backs alone, you could have a 5-a-side outfield team there. So obviously Spurs were looking to get Serge Aurier out the door. They were willing to listen to offers for Matt Doherty as well. And nothing came for Serge Aurier. Nothing arrived of any real note. So we got to the situation where, when was it? Was it 9:30, 10 o'clock? It was late in the day. I started to get wind that they were talking about his contract. Then I saw that, I think it was RMC Sport in France, then actually went with that, reported that. So I kept digging around and I was told, yes, it's very close. So I went with it as well. And then, whatever it was, half an hour afterwards, we had the announcement that his contract had been mutually terminated. And he had this little kind of quote that they put out from him, just essentially saying, enjoyed my time, but it was time to leave Tottenham Hotspur. And that's been very much the case for Serge Aurier for probably 3 summers in a row now. He's just wanted to leave Tottenham. He has. I think I may have said before, I've certainly written, I think I've said it in these videos before, there was always a feeling at Tottenham this summer that Aurier and his agent were very confident he was leaving Tottenham, despite the fact that Tottenham hadn't had approaches for him. And there was this feeling that they were working on something, or his agent was working on something, and obviously everyone presumed it was a move somewhere. Perhaps, I'm not saying it definitely was, but perhaps now we've seen what's happened, perhaps there was this feeling that at the end of the day, we'll just go to Tottenham and we'll try and get the contract cancelled. I mean, financially, it's not the greatest move in the world for Tottenham. Of course it's not. You've had a player that signed for, 23, 24 million pounds in 2017, and 4 years later, you're letting him go for no transfer fee. I presume for such an agreement to take place, he would have had to give up a fair whack of the remainder of his wages. Because don't forget, Serge Aurier is going to do very well out of this situation. He's 28. He's a good right back. Whatever we say about him, or I even whinge about him sometimes, he is a good right back who can play for a lot of teams in football. And he will go out there, he will get a very nice signing on fee as a free agent and probably very decent wages as well. So I'd be stunned if the mutual agreement wasn't weighted more in Tottenham's favour. But I haven't had anything definite on that, so it may not be the case. But obviously, clearly, they're not just going to end his contract right now because there's no benefit to the club whatsoever of doing that. But yeah, it was made quite clear to him as well. Not that I think he was bothered because he just wanted to go anyway, but it was made clear, look, if you do stay, you're going to very much be on the outskirts of everything. You're not going to be registered for the Europa Conference League squad because Tottenham had 1 player over in the European squad with their foreign players, so that would have been Serge Aurier. And it was made clear that, there are spaces in the Premier League squad, so you probably would have been registered. However, when you've got 3 right backs who all want to be at the club, if there's one who's the 4th, doesn't matter whether you're technically in the pecking order you think is better, those other 3 players shouldn't be behind him. Some people might say, oh, but what about Harry Kane? Harry Kane's different. Harry Kane decided at a certain point, as we saw in the window, move away wasn't going to happen. So he just thought, right, bang, focus, Tottenham. This is what I want. That didn't seem to be the case with Serge. He just wanted to leave, which is fair enough because I think the club were happy to see him go, especially with 9 months left of his contract. I'd probably say most fans, I wouldn't say all because he's got a few fans out there, but I'd say most fans have probably accepted his time was done at Tottenham. But yeah, it would have been very much a kind of a Danny Rose season for him and just a waste of his career. Personally, what do I think about Serge's time at Tottenham? I'd say it was a bit of a horror show for me for the first couple of seasons. I felt he improved a lot under Mourinho. I still think there were moments where he just switched off the concentration. For me, the lowest point will still be during the Poch era, the Bayern Munich game at home, when he just wandered around the pitch, not really having any positional sense or care in the world, really. And there was that one weird moment where he was almost playing as a number 10 behind Harry Kane, and Lamela was screaming at him to get back to right back. That for me was probably the worst. But like I say, I don't think he was as bad as people make out. I do think he improved. He will probably get known. I know Who Scored put out the stat yesterday that during his time at Tottenham, his 7 foul throws were the most of any player in the Premier League. I think 3 of them came against Crystal Palace. I remember asking Poch about them and him having a laugh about it. What people mustn't forget was how incredibly brave and also committed to Tottenham he was when his brother died. That was so horrific. The most horrific thing, your brother being murdered. And, just the grief and everything. But it came at a time when Tottenham were a bit stuffed, I think, injury-wise, if I remember correctly. Right, but I feel like Japhet Tanganga was injured as well, so maybe all they had was him at that point. I can't remember. But essentially, they needed him, and he played. He played for Tottenham, and before going off, and that for me was an incredible mark of a human being. I thought it was no need to do it whatsoever. So I thought that was just a huge, huge credit to him. He was very popular within the club. A lot of players really loved him. I was fortunate enough to do the first interview he did when he came to England, like first proper sit-down feature-y interview. And I think, unless I've missed one, maybe the only interview he ended up doing in England, unless he did another one and I missed it afterwards. I found him to be a very interesting character. He clearly has had issues in the past with the things he's said and done. I didn't get the sense in that interview that he entirely regretted those things, but I do feel that he was a guy that was maturing and moving on. He'd just become a dad and he had a different outlook on things. I'd say as a person, he certainly was never the trouble that people maybe expected him to be. There was that one moment where at half-time he stormed off in the Liverpool game after being substituted. You could say that was an attitude thing. I think some people would also look at that as a passion thing, that just being so upset at being taken off and wanting to fight for the club. So yeah, Serge Aurier is gone. Making it sound like he's dead. He's not dead. He's very much alive, and he will go on, and it'd be interesting to see where he ends up and what happens next for him. But obviously it leaves Tottenham with now the 3 right-backs. You've got, just for some reason I keep calling Emerson in my head Romero. I'm about to say Romero. I don't know why. Emerson. You've got him, who will be very much adapting to the Premier League and the experience of that. It could take him a little while, but they've got high hopes for him. They've got Japhet Tanganga, who's smashing it right now. And then you've got Matt Doherty, who obviously has to then, still hasn't quite hit the ground running, as it were, at Tottenham. And it'll be interesting to see how he deals with the extra competition. There'll be a lot of matches this season, so he will get game time. I'm just intrigued to see how it works out for him and maybe what comes in January. We'll see how that works out. So that was the incoming and outgoings in the right-back slot. And don't worry if you're wondering, like, why aren't you talking about what hasn't happened? We will. That's coming up. I'm just talking about deadline day just for now. Cameron Carter-Vickers, I mentioned earlier, kept me awake at night. it was a really weird one because I was aware all day that they were trying to do a deal with Celtic, but it was just on and off. At one point, looked like it was happening, then it wasn't, and it was. They'd been interested in him from elsewhere. I know Newcastle were interested in Graham Jones, who was at Newcastle. I think he's just left the FA. He had Carter-Vickers at both. I think he worked with him at Bournemouth and Luton. Very much a big fan, and there was some prospect of Newcastle making a move, but that didn't happen in the end. And then eventually, we got right to the end of the day, and it turned out that he was going to Celtic. I got wind of that, and then I got told it was a season-long loan, which for me was like, huh? Because as far as I was aware, and I think the public as a whole were aware, Carter-Vickers' contract was to end next summer. So for me, that didn't make sense. Like, why are you loaning a player out? And I was told with an option to buy. How does that happen when he's available for free next summer? So I had to do some digging, and that was why it was a bit of a late one. So eventually what I found out, and again, some of you may not care one bit about Cameron Carter-Vickers, and I noticed that on social media, but I'm going to explain why I think that's really harsh. But essentially, the reason they're able to do this option to buy for Celtic is that Cameron Carter-Vickers, unbeknownst to the outside world, Spurs have, each time he's gone on loan, been agreeing with him an extension to his contract. It hasn't been publicised, but that's what's been happening. And what then, with a knock-on effect of that, Spurs always had an option to extend his deal as well for a year. But every time he's naturally agreed himself to extend his contract, so that option has also been pushed off for a year as well. So essentially, it's always guaranteed Tottenham for 2 years. And I'm led to believe, whether I was told this is exactly right or not, there may even be that he's got 2 years left if he were to return next summer. Which, yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating what's happening with Cameron Carter-Vickers. Maybe for me, because I'm a bit nerdy about that sort of stuff. Maybe not so much for the general Tottenham fan. And I saw a lot of this on Twitter. This is ranty mode. I'm not going to rant, but just, this feeling that, oh my God, get him out of my club. He's rubbish. Oh my God, what is he still doing there? Stinking up the hallways, all this sort of stuff. And you just think, what I'd like to say about Cameron Carter-Vickers is that he's a 23-year-old defender who, anytime Tottenham fans have seen him on the whole, it has been in like a one-game scenario. They've seen him maybe early in pre-season as he's trying to get to grips with things. They've maybe seen him come in for the odd cup game. What I would say is if you speak to Bournemouth fans and Luton fans over the last couple of years and ask them about a player when he's playing with a run of games under his belt, they will speak very highly of Cameron Carter-Vickers. He is not a bad player. I'd go as far to say as I think he could end up being a Premier League player. He did very, very well at Bournemouth, who are a team who I think if they went up, they probably would have looked to bring him in permanently and have him in their team. And obviously, they had a managerial change as well with Scott Parker going in, which slightly changed kind of who he liked and all that sort of stuff. But I think if Jonathan Woodgate had been in charge and they'd gone up, I think he probably would have looked to bring Carter-Vickers in. And I think he'll do very well at Celtic. And I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic buy him anyway next summer. We mustn't forget, this is someone that Poch said early on, when he was 18, he said he had the potential to be one of the best young defenders in the Premier League. And, just because we've seen him have a couple of shaky games coming back in for Tottenham, it doesn't change that. And yes, against Pesos in that first leg, he had an iffy one. He did. But like I say, every person I've spoken to around the club, they adored him at Luton. He essentially was a key part of them staying in the Championship. And at Bournemouth as well. He had a tough first half of the year with injuries and stuff. And then when Woodgate came in, things changed. He got in the team. Second half of the year again was excellent. So I don't like this whole digging out young players because we don't think they're Champions League quality and all that sort of stuff. It's not how it works. And also this thought of just get him out of my club. What people don't remember as well is that there's this other side to football and football clubs. And this is where it is slightly business related. And you see Chelsea have always done it very well. It's the use of the loan system. And Carter-Vickers will have made money for Tottenham Hotspur. He will. because he won't be on the greatest of wages. He won't. It may have increased in recent years as he's done better and better in the Championship. But Tottenham, on some of those loans, will have got loan fees. His wages will have been paid by the club he's gone to. And obviously, he cost them little to nothing because he was an academy player, came through. Essentially, it's just his education within the academy that's been paid for. So he will have been a profitable player for Tottenham Hotspur as a whole. He's had a lot of, it's like 6 or 7 loans. And eventually, if he goes to Celtic and he has a cracking season, they pay for him, he goes there, then in a weird way, he's been successful, or he's been a success for Tottenham's academy is probably the way to put it, isn't it? They will have developed him, they will have nurtured him, they will have put him out there, he'll have played a lot of football, and eventually they will have made some money on him. And any money, we cannot be sniffy about money coming into a football club. Even if it's just a couple of million, that coming in goes towards something else, whether it goes towards a new contract for someone, whether it goes towards a transfer fee, some add-ons, whatever, it all helps. So just essentially looking at it as a bit of a computer game thing and saying, get him out of my club. Sorry, that did end up being a rant, and I didn't mean it to be a rant. But I don't like that. Maybe it's because I get to talk to these players. I've interviewed Cameron before, and I know them more as human beings rather than just people on a TV screen or a name in a computer game or something. I just got that slightly bit more of a connection, and I don't like that. Another move, which again, for those who aren't particularly fussed about what happens below the first team, may not be too fussed about. But Janelle Bennett has gone out on loan to Crewe in League One, which is a fantastic move for him. Honestly, if you haven't seen much of Janelle play, really keep an eye on him this season. I think this could be a massive game changer for him, this loan. I like Janelle a lot. He's been very unfortunate that he's kind of had some crucial kind of timed injuries just when maybe he could have started to get more involved in pre-seasons and things like that. He did play against Pesos. He came on towards the end out in Portugal. And I really like him. He's a winger who can kind of come into the centre at times. He scores goals. He can set up goals. And I really hope and I think that this Crewe loan could be the making of him. And that it may be that it's come at a point in his career that, it then leads him to a Football League career or maybe higher. It could be that it gives him enough confidence that he comes back to Tottenham. As I think he's 19 now. He may come back as a 20-year-old, and it may help him kick on. They may look at him and see what obviously happened to Skippy and think maybe even more for him. But either way, I think it'll be a great move for him. It's quite interesting that he went out in the end because Tottenham had decided that they initially were going to loan a fair few players out. I mean, at one point last season, Spurs had about 16, 17 players out on loan from the academy. But what they found was that a lot of them moved on permanently. Obviously, we know the likes of Serkin, Ioma, players like that, all moved on. But then this season is just such a cluster of games. You've got not only the amazingly named Papa John's Trophy, which is the old EFL trophy for people that might not be aware of it. There's Premier League 2 matches they've got to play. There's FA Youth Cup, there's all that sort of stuff, which obviously is a slightly younger group. And also there's the Europa Conference League, where, as we've already seen, it looks like a lot of the younger players are going to be involved. So Spurs made the decision that in the last week or so of the window, that they probably weren't going to allow too many to go out on loan, just to have them as backup and then revisit it in January. There were some who decided otherwise themselves, in terms of like Jack Clark. Jack Clark, I think the Spurs would have listened. They had a bit of interest in him. They would have listened to that loan interest. But Jack decided, nope, I'm going to fight it out. I'm going to try and show Nuno what I've got. He did similar last year, although that was actually more Jose Mourinho wanted to keep him around. And then obviously went on in January to Stoke and had a good loan before his ankle injury. Personally, I think it's becoming very, very tough for him to get noticed among the amount of wingers Spurs have and get any game time. But fair play to any player, I think, who wants to try and fight for his spot. That deserves credit in my book. But I think it's going to be very tough for him. I'd be stunned if we don't see a loan in January. When it comes to Jack, because It's a slightly different scenario than Cameron Carter-Vickers in that he was paid a fee for about 9 million something. It's difficult at this moment in time to see it as a successful move for him. Obviously, I don't know whether the loan fees that Spurs have had thus far have started to balance that out. The fee they paid, I don't know. But one to revisit in a few months. We'll have a chat about whether Jack Clarke's been a successful move at the moment. I'd say probably right now, probably hasn't. But we'll see. We'll see. And Harvey White, obviously, he's going to be still around for the few months. Maybe until January, when I did think he'd get a loan. I think he probably did need one. Dylan Markanday's an interesting one. He's had a fantastic time. I should say Jack Clarke, the interest was both from up in Scotland and in England. But Dylan Markanday has been superb. Tail end of last season and start of this season, he's been phenomenal. And Spurs had interest in him quite a lot. And he could have gone out, but they decided, they want to keep him in and around as well. And I think he was on the bench. It was the home game against Pesos. My brain's gone at the moment. It's certainly one of the games. I think it might be in the home game, which was very much just reward for what he's been doing. And I'll be interested to see whether, if he keeps up this form, whether he starts to get some little minutes here and there in cup matches. He certainly deserves to make his debut, maybe above some others who already have for Tottenham. Keep an eye on Dylan Markanday. He's got a little bit of the Marcus Edwards low centre of gravity kind of movement on around the pitch about him. And he's also got a fair bit of end product as well. I think he played well again in the Papa John Trophy last night, which was one of those where, I was watching it thinking, I could have been at that rather than doing all this transfer malarkey. But there you go. So that was deadline day. I don't think, to be honest, that there was always, talk of one potential more incoming Spurs we're looking at. But from everything I understood, the Traore deal was pretty much dead the day before. Spurs were willing to go up to a certain amount for him. Wolves wanted far, far more. And it just never really came to pass. You know my feelings on Adama Traore. I'm not going to go into it in detail at all because ultimately I think he's got a lot of skill and a lot of pace, a lot of strength. I still don't believe for the money that was being asked for, I think we're looking at 50 million plus. I don't think the end product would have still justified that. And I also feel Tottenham have so many wingers. I still don't feel that. Ruben Neves was one that kind of came up at one point. I know, like Espirito, Santo and Paratici really like Traore. I understand that, both of them really like Neves as well. He's got a lot of admirers within Tottenham. But I think as soon as it became clear that Tanguy Ndombele was staying, it became a bit of a not a chance kind of move, really. And also I think it just would have cost a lot of money as well from Wolves. And again, I think a slightly crowded position, that central midfield still. Let's look at the window as a whole. Would I term it to be a success? Someone asked me yesterday, what figure would I give the window? I would say a 7.5 I'm going to go for. Because I think ultimately one of the biggest issues at Tottenham has been getting players out the door. And whether we agree with the financial ends to some of the deals, Paratici, I am going to pronounce it correctly each time. You may see me suddenly stumble just at the start as I remember exactly how it is because my brain is so tuned to saying it the way I used to. Paratici, he's gone about his business and he's got them out the door. I mean, you look at it. Serge Aurier has gone. Moussa Sissoko has gone. Eric Lamela has gone. Toby Alderweireld has gone. Juan Foyth has gone. Joe Hart has gone. And then he also, before that, had Danny Rose and Paolo Gazzaniga also going. Think about that, shifting off the wage bill. You think about the older heads that, let's be honest, were kind of, a lot of them were just now a feature. Foyth aside, were a bit of a feature of the team. Maybe representative of a time where Tottenham couldn't win things and weren't improving. I don't know. That's probably unfair on some of them who were superb at one point. But yeah, they're out the door, and this is a very different Tottenham squad now. Son, there was an interview he did yesterday where he's like, I'm now the third oldest player at Tottenham Hotspur, which is mad. It's Sonny when you think about it. But yeah, he's 29. I think you've got Doherty, who's 29, but a couple of months older. And then you've got Hugo Lloris, and that's it. You know, we spoke about so many times about the painful rebuild and the revamp and the refresh. It's being done. It is. And you look at the five who came in. You've got Pierluigi Gallini, you've got Brian Hill, you've got Christian Romero, you've got Pape Matar, who obviously has gone back to Metz for the season to develop, and then you had Emerson yesterday. So if you're looking at what they've done in terms of those incomings, you can look at it and say they have addressed a big old problem last season, I think, and that was the defence. Ironically, the defence has actually been looking more solid anyway with Nuno working on it. But what I would say now is that you've got, in Christian Romero, as I said before, I think a game changer for the central defence. When he comes in there and he starts to play regular football, I think we'll find that he will be hopefully one of the stars, defensive stars of the Premier League. So that's a huge plus to the squad. And would I say that he's better than Toby Alderweireld is in this moment? Yes. So that's an upgrade for me. Gallini, he's looked to be the successor for Lloris for next season. Is he an upgrade on Joe Hart? Yes, I'd say he is. Gil, essentially he's replacing Lamela. Is he an upgrade? We'll see. He's obviously one more for the long term. That's the talk about him as a prospect, but let's not forget that at 20 years old, Lamela was a huge prospect as well. I like Eric Lamela, so you're probably not going to hear me saying anything too much bad about him anyway. But Spurs will believe that Gil will be an upgrade on Lamela. That will be the thinking. Sarr, the thinking there will be that he will be a big player for Tottenham, massive talent in Ligue 1 football. I wouldn't maybe use him as the one to say, is he better than Sissoko? Because for me, and I'm going to use the old cliche, it's like a new signing. Oliver Skipp, I think, coming in is essentially that new signing, as it were, in that area. And I think for me, personally, I think he is and will be a better player than Moussa Sissoko. And I'm not on the Moussa Sissoko hate train either. I think Moussa Sissoko, especially the year of the Champions League final, was incredible. He was dominant. He was everywhere. And you don't become a France international by being a rubbish player. Don't. We know what his limitations were, of course, but I still believe myself that in terms of ability, I think Skippy can be an even better player. So for me, I think that's an upgrade. And then you've got Emerson. Emerson, will see whether he becomes an upgrade in Aurier. But again, the club believe he will be. So all 5 incoming players, 4 obviously here this season, if you're going to include Skippy as well as a player coming back, and you've got Sessegnon as well, a player coming back. Yes, I think they've strengthened those areas that they wanted to strengthen. Don't worry, I'm coming to negatives of transfer window as well. If you're thinking, why haven't you mentioned all the other stuff? I am. I just want to do the pluses first. What I also will talk about is what for me is probably the biggest move of the transfer window for any club, and that is keeping Harry Kane. Whatever we want to be, whether anyone wants to be disgruntled with Harry Kane, whether anyone wants to say, yeah, but he was there all along. Keeping Harry Kane is a huge, huge move. If you think about it, we've spoken about this millions of times, how difficult it would have been to replace Harry Kane. At your best case scenario, you bring in 3 top players to try to replace all of the things he does for Tottenham, and then you've got the risk of those 3 players. Do they adapt to the Premier League? Do they adapt to Tottenham? Can they do what Harry Kane did? And, keeping Harry Kane gives you the guarantee of Harry Kane-ness. You get the goals, you get the assists. Obviously, you can't rule out injuries, but if you look at last season, on the whole, he steered clear of them on the whole, and he was incredible. And it was a season where he wasn't particularly delighted as it was anyway. I think there were hopes last summer that he might have got a move out as well, and he still had a season like that. And he's come back and he's saying the right things. There was more England quotes came out from the England camp from him, just saying, look, I've got no regrets over what happened in the summer, but what I will always say is my dream has always been to win trophies for Tottenham, and that's what let's do that. Let's do that this season. Let's go and do that. He sounds, I think I told you before, he's been very, very positive talks with him and Nuno, and also with Paratici and his representatives as well. There's a real, okay, we're buying into some of what you're doing. Of course, he just couldn't get his move. That's part of it. But ultimately, how people deal with these kind of setbacks define them. And I get the feeling that Harry Kane's the kind of character that will want to prove a point to Man City. He will want to say, look, you mugs, you really should have actually gone all out for me. All this stuff Pep Guardiola is saying in his press conference, we tried everything. No, they didn't. They really didn't. And Harry Kane will know that. I think he'll have a big season for Tottenham. And I think, working in this whole kind of new Nuno, that's difficult to say, new Nuno setup, I think I can understand why I think he'd be quite excited. And he's looking at, it's very early days, of course it is. And Nuno absolutely slapped me down for asking him even if he was just pleased with how they were doing to be in that position of being top. They're all very, very being careful about getting too far ahead of themselves. But there will be positivity there. Kane will feel that camp is coming together again. And, a lot of the other players have gone out. There's new, fresh faces. There's got to be excitement to a new feel around the club. It won't feel like the same stale club that Kane was starting to get a bit fed up with. So all of that will play its part. So that, for me, is a huge statement from Tottenham to keep him, and also from City in not getting him. And we mustn't also forget, Sonny signed a new contract as well. Sonny is one of the best players in the Premier League, and Spurs tied him down to a new 4-year deal as well. So with all of that in mind, and Tottenham, that's now, Tottenham have the best, I'd probably put up there potentially the best strike duo in the Premier League, Son and Kane. They have them, and they have them for another season at least. And I wouldn't be shocked if Harry Kane sticks around longer than that. I kind of feel like, it sounds awful to say, but I think maybe this summer was his chance. I think that, I may be completely wrong. It may be that he just goes next summer. But I just kind of feel like maybe that was the moment, and that now he just looks at it and just cracks on with Tottenham, because I don't know whether he'll quite reach Jimmy Greaves' record this season. He might. It would have been incredible. So if he does, then Tottenham will have done phenomenal things. But I just kind of feel, that's just my gut feeling. But let's see. With all of that, I think that's where all the plus is, and that's why it's got the 7.5 for me. I think they addressed a lot of the issues. Everyone's always using this horrible term, deadwood. Get the deadwood out, like there's these bloody awful players stinking up a club, which just isn't the case. But they've got a lot of those players out of the club that weren't going to be guaranteed starters this season, and they've replaced them with younger, new talent, as it were. So that's good. And I think the players that have all come in have been very good. I think keeping Kane and Son is huge. My greedy side, the reason I haven't gone any higher, I've left that 2.5 off the score, is I still believe that there should have been, just Tottenham haven't replaced Christian Eriksen exactly, in my mind. I know he's a tough guy to replace because of the very interesting kind of playmaker he was, with his work rate and the movement and everything in the ground that he covered. I personally still would have liked to see a more Eriksen type come in, who is very much set as an attacking midfielder, playmaker who plays higher up the pitch. And I will balance it out with what I'm told from Tottenham. People in Tottenham say, look, we believe Tanguy Ndombele can play that role. We believe that Giovanni Lo Celso can play that role. And also Dele Alli is an attacking midfielder who can play in the centre. And you've also got Brian Hill now and Lucas Moura, who can also play as number 10s as well. So I get that, and I get that logic. But yeah, for me, I just kind of feel like that was just a little bit of a missing link in the team. And obviously the striker. The striker, I'm told that the view from Espirito Santo and from Paratici was that they only wanted one kind of striker if they were going to get one, and that was a top draw starting striker who would play alongside Kane, or play alongside Kane, and if Kane were to leave in the future, would end up being the long-term future of Tottenham Hotspur up front. And the theory was, if they couldn't get one of those players, then they were absolutely happy with Son playing up front with Kane, and then they'd look to try to perhaps bring in a winger, and obviously Traoré was the one they were going to look at. We know they went for Martinez, and they also went for Vlahovic. They were two names that they felt could be that striker. But what kind of, for me, they didn't feel after that was, when they couldn't get them, was that they didn't feel that a backup striker was what they wanted. Just someone that would sit there, a Vinicius, a Llorente, a Janssen. Their view is that Son, Nuno sees Son as a striker, whereas Mourinho didn't. I think there's a feeling within, among Nuno and Paratici that a little bit like Ronaldo, I'm not saying he's like Ronaldo, but in terms of the positional movement, that they feel that Son could, if he wanted, move from being a wide player to being a more through the middle player. He's not that target man type, but we've already seen in a front three, when Kane hasn't been there, he can do that very well. And their feeling is, well, you've got two strikers there. There's a lot of belief in Dane Scarlett. Obviously, so young. He's only turned 17 recently, and he's got a lot of developing to do. Even watching him out against Pesos in Portugal, without the creativity around him, he struggled a bit. He needs service. He's not a Harry Kane type. I'd say yet. He could become one, but he's not someone that really can create his own chances right now. I personally wouldn't say, say you had an injury to Kane and Son in the next couple of weeks. I think I'd be a little bit worried about throwing him into the Premier League right now. Come January, when Spurs may look in the striker market, perhaps by that point, if he's getting minutes in the Cups, in the Conference League, perhaps he'll have developed enough, and working with Kane and Son in training sessions and Nuno, he may well have got there. I mean, we've seen people like United, you've seen Rashford and Greenwood, players that have developed very quickly at that young age, and Spurs really believe he can. But yeah, I just feel, for me, they still needed a Vinicius type. I understand their logic. Their thinking is that don't just bring in players for the sake of it into a squad. They've got to improve the squad. I just would be concerned if in these next 4 months there's an injury to Kane and Son. I just feel, I don't like Lucas up front. I don't think it's a good role for him. I don't think it works for him. And like I say, I think Dane will be a wonderful player, but it might just be too early for him to lead a line. But yeah, so they're my only two quibbles of the window. I still think in terms of squad depth, there's a lot there, especially in the defence that was an issue before. And, we've also had the bonus of the likes of Dyer and Sanchez starting the season superbly. And that's obviously given more of a good selection headache as well. Midfield, there's a lot there now. Attacking midfield options, there's a lot there as well. It's just obviously if something happens to Kane and Son. But we'll see. However many, you could say that about most clubs. If you took out their top two attackers, what would they actually be like? But yeah, overall, 7.5. That's what I'm giving it. I think there was a hell of a lot of good stuff done by Paratici. Be very interesting to see. Because obviously you'll have Sarr coming in next summer as well. That'll be another midfielder to come to the ranks. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Harry Winks and how much football he gets this season. But yeah, I did one little tiny thing I wanted to also touch on was the theme this summer of players asking to leave Tottenham, but then not having the club they dreamt of going to there for them. And it was a real theme. We've already spoken about Kane and Man City not being there for him. Tanguy Ndombele was exactly the same. He wanted to move to a bigger club, and I'm told there were a couple of bigger La Liga clubs interested in him, but neither approach really satisfied the player and or the club. Serge Aurier, had dreams of going back to PSG. They had a little bit of interest in him down their list of potential right-backs. We know they bought Hakimi, and essentially that never happened for him. Moussa Sissoko, slightly different. Moussa wanted to go, but also Spurs have, essentially said to him, you're going anyway. he struggled to find any real interest until right at the last minute with Watford. It was lovely, by the way, to see him get his reception at the Tottenham Hotspur, say a proper goodbye, as did Danny Rose. It was really, really lovely. Very, very nice moment. Even Toby Alderweireld, Toby Alderweireld's dream was to go back to Belgium or the Netherlands just to kind of let his kids grow up there. None of those clubs could afford him. He ended up going to Qatar and earning lots of money. So it's not like he's bad off or anything. But I just think that's quite interesting that everyone that asked to leave actually struggled to get the move they wanted, which I don't know if that's a grass isn't always greener thing, or sometimes you've got to kind of take stock of exactly where you are and what you are and where you're at. I don't know. Maybe there's nothing to be learned from it. Maybe it was purely just circumstance. But I just thought that was a really interesting common theme among all the players that asked to leave the club. Whereas someone like Lamela didn't want to leave the club, and bang, straight away Sevilla came in for him, and he's having a blast there as well. He's doing really, really well. I have mentioned about Tongi. Obviously, Tongi has stayed. I don't think any club were really ever seriously going to get to the kind of money that Tottenham would have required to take him away. Now Tongi has to do the cycle I've spoken about before, which is, knuckle down, work hard, focus, play well, believe his own hype, strop, want to leave the club, start again. Not getting a move, start again. And now hopefully we're in the knuckle down bit, focus, because I will say it a million times, I still believe in this 4-3-3. He could be huge for Tottenham. I think he could be incredible in front of Skip and Højbjerg. Not quite, I don't think, the left-sided role that Dele plays. I think more in front of them. But yeah, it's all down to Tongi. There's no one else. No one else can make this happen. Be interesting to see how he is in this very new Tottenham with all the different people. Obviously, Serge and Musa, people he was very close to, have now gone. I know he's also very close to Sonny, Sessegnon. I think they drive in together most days. Kane as well. It'd be interesting to see how he adapts to that change. Different people around him. Obviously, he has his own friends. We're not saying it's only his Tottenham friends or his best mates, but yeah, he is now here at the least until January. So he's got to knuckle down, and he's got so much more to give. He really does. I've said this before, but I just feel he has to not regret what he's done in his career, rather than focus on where he should feel he should be. Focus on what he should be, not where he should be. But yeah, I'm not going to go on about Tongi because you've heard that many, many times before. So that's the window. Now we obviously have the international break, which is so boring. I just, me and the international break, I'm not a huge fan of it. And we've got the added complication of the South American fixtures and the isolation afterwards, which affects Christian Romero, Giovanni Lo Celso and Davinson Sanchez. Obviously, if you've been living on a different planet, red list countries, you have to isolate in a government-designated hotel on your return, which, is not going to be controlled by the club, would be not getting much fitness at all, if any. It would be sitting in a room watching a telly. So, I understand that Tottenham have kind of got to deal with the players, that they won't play in their third game of their little series, which would bring them back, which would start their isolation, let's say, because of what I'm going to say next, 6-7 days earlier, which is good. It means it doesn't wipe out as much time. And from reports in Argentina, it sounds like a potential solution could be that they go and like a training camp of sorts with some other Argentinian players. I don't know how it worked for Davinson Sanchez, but go to a Croatian-like training camp where there they can work on all their fitness, stay tuned up and ready and sharp. And then because they're in Croatia, which obviously has very different rules coming back to the UK, once they've done their 10 days, they can come back into England and, they will miss the Palace game and the Rennes game in the Conference League, but if that training camp element works, then would be available, it would be for the Chelsea game. I think they just get back before that. So it'd be intriguing to see. Nuno said, we asked him about it, and he said that, yeah, we've got plans in action to combat this. So that could be what it is. Whether it will be a Spurs coach going out there and maybe Sanchez goes there as well and the Spurs coach works with them, I don't know. We'll find out more in the kind of coming days. But yeah, it's one way around it. It's just a farce, really, with FIFA and with governments not being able to sort out kind of elite sportsman exemptions. And I guess some people would maybe rightly say, why should they be any different, perhaps? But yeah, when we've got, I think there's another 2 international breaks after this, just this year alone, because you've got the Copa America, is it the World Cup qualifying? There's something, but South America has a load of games to fit in as well. So it's going to be an absolute mess to fit in. And if they're unable to come back straight into the country after these matches, it's I don't get it. And I understand some of the players, I'm not going to say who, but some weren't particularly keen on going. Don't forget, for any of them with families and loved ones, girlfriends, whatever, they are going to be essentially, including the isolation, going to be away from their families for 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, this is tough. It's really tough. And and some of the FAs, the national FAs, there's a lot of pressure to play for your country as well. So yeah, it's not ideal. It really isn't ideal at all. So it'd be interesting to see who plays in defence, against Palace, because Joe Rodon potentially could have gone on Wales duty, but maybe just played the last game, but the decision was made for him just to withdraw, but which should mean he'll be fit for Palace. So you've got then potentially Dyer and Rodon together against Palace. You've got maybe Japhet Tanganga comes inside and plays in central defence, and you have Emerson playing down the right. We'll see. Obviously, the Conference League groups have been drawn. If you've missed that, it's Rennes, Vitesse Arnhem, and Mura, the Slovenian side as well. So, Rennes are interesting. They've just lost Camavinga, but I think they spent the most in terms of transfer fees in Ligue 1. So they're very much going to be a new look side as well. Obviously, PSG had the best transfer window out of anyone, but the bulk of it was all free transfers. Funny window. So there you go. I think we've covered pretty much everything there. A funny window, funny summer. I'd still say I think Spurs are stronger for it. Attacking wise, we'll see. But like I say, when you keep 2 of the best in Europe, in Kane and Son, tying one down to a new contract and the other one could potentially be here for longer than just this season as well, I think you've got 2 of the brightest attacking stars maybe in the world, let alone Europe. So, and I think they've fixed a lot of the defensive problems. I hope they have. I think Romero's going to be huge. I said huge a lot today. Apologies for that. And there's so many. For me as a journalist, I'm really looking forward to it, because a lot of these players that have now gone, I've been writing about their mistakes and things, and the same players, knowing what they do week in, week out. I find it quite exciting it's like quite a big fresh start at Tottenham. We've got a new managing director of football in Fabio Paratici. You've got a new head coach in Nuno Espirito Santo. You've got the 5 new signings. Technically, 1 still hasn't come in yet. You've got Skip and Sessegnon back, and we're going to see much more of them. You've got young, exciting players like Dane Scarlett and Niall John as well. We're going to see, I think, a bit more of this season as well. Just a bit of a new feel to Tottenham. And I don't think that's a bad thing whatsoever, because I feel everything was going stale. And you could see the decline, in the league table. Top of the table right now, which is fantastic. And it's great for Nuno, and it's great kind of just as showing all the players, look, it's working. Let's crack on. Let's get on with this. So that's really good. And I will do another one. I might do a Q&A as the next one, as I try and do in international breaks, because obviously we haven't got matches to talk about as well. So think up your questions. Maybe leave them in the comments underneath this. and then I will use them as the questions for the Q&A next time. Yeah, let's do that. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.